Detective Miles Miller. He wasn't just on suspension, he was practically an outcast. Running a ghost case from his sedan when the emergency call diverted him. Frank Harrington, dead. Miller knew the game. This wasn't about justice. This was damage control for the state's most powerful. And the remote, storm-lashed Blackwood Manor was the perfect place to bury the mess. The victim, Frank Harrington, was not just a real estate titan, he was a notorious manipulator who controlled politicians, courts, and as Miller would soon discover, the lives of everyone trapped inside. The stage tableau. Miller entered the dining room. Harrington lay dead, a pristine tableau of spite. The stab wound, a single clean, precise puncture. The staging, the exotic, shimmering snake scale pinned to his jacket. The message, the open Poe book, the Tale of Hearts, at his hand. Miller bypassed the body and examined the room's temperature. The windows were sealed, yet the air was unnaturally cool near the victim. He found a partially open, nearly invisible ventilator grate behind a heavy silk curtain. Someone wanted the room cold. The guests and their chains. Miller interviewed the 3 suspects, not for alibis, but for their chains, the secrets Frank held over them. Evelyn Harrington, the wife. Years ago, she was the primary witness to Frank's first murder, the accidental death of a mistress, which Frank covered up with his power. Frank demanded she meet to sign a new will that explicitly mentioned her role in the cover-up, legally binding her to silence even after his death. Silas Vance, the solicitor. He was an embezzler. Vance wasn't just running Frank's illegal accounts, he was also skimming millions for his own lavish lifestyle. Frank, knowing Vance was stealing, forced him to draft the final will to be executed at midnight, naming Vance the executor, a position that would instantly subject Vance's fraudulent records to a forensic audit. Dr. Alastair Finch, the physician. He was addicted to a rare, expensive synthetic sedative, a supply Frank controlled through black market contacts. Finch needed Frank to survive to maintain his addiction. Frank ordered him here to give a second opinion on the heart condition Frank claimed was killing him, threatening to cut off Finch's supply if he failed to produce a glowing health report. The clock twist. All 3 claimed to have heard the clock chime at a different, wrong time. Miller checked the gargoyle clock again. He found the gargoyle's mouth was stuffed with a tiny wad of cotton wool, damp with a pungent chemical ether. The clock chimed correctly, but the ether muffled the sound, causing the suspects to misjudge the exact time, throwing off the timeline by 5 to 10 minutes. The evidence that lies. Miller searched the room again. He found 2 critical, contradictory clues. 1. The stiletto's sheath. Behind the bar, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, Miller found a leather sheath for a knife. It was expensive, custom-made, and bore the initials SV for Silas Vance. 2. The alibi breaker. In a cold vase near the ventilator grate, Miller found a single, used hypodermic needle, the kind Finch used for his sedatives, bearing traces of the synthetic sedative Finch was addicted to. Initial conclusion: Vance stabbed him to prevent the audit, then tried to frame Finch by using the sedation and cooling to slow the body's cooling time, obscuring the hour. Miller gathered the 3 suspects. He laid out the evidence, watching them react to the lies they were being told about the evidence. Miller, Mr. Vance, your knife sheath was found. You had the means and the motive to stop the audit. Vance began to shake uncontrollably. I carried a knife for self-defense. Frank had threatened me, but I didn't use it. Miller, Dr. Finch, the needle confirms your presence and your addiction. Did you inject him with a fatal dose? Knowing his heart would fail. Finch was too still. I treated him, nothing more. But I saw the real killer, Detective. Miller turned to Evelyn, holding up the photo of the lovers he'd found hidden in the ventilator grate. Miller, Evelyn, you were Finch's lover years ago. You conspired with him to cover up a murder then. Did you conspire to commit one now, using Finch's sedatives to knock Frank out so Vance could stab him and take the blame? Evelyn was defiant. I hated Frank, but I didn't kill him. And the photo? Frank planted that the day before he died, threatening to send it to the press if I didn't comply with the new will. He was still trying to control me from the grave. The true Serpent Miller took a deep breath. He saw the pattern, not a simple motive, but a chain of spite, each link forged by Frank Harrington himself. Miller, everyone lied, but two of you lied to cover a different crime than murder. The killer is Dr. Finch. Finch smiled, a horrifyingly calm expression. Baseless speculation. The sedative was harmless. Miller, you're right about the sedative, Doctor. It was harmless until you activated it. Miller slammed the table. He pointed to the exotic snake scale, the core of the mystery. Miller, that scale wasn't left as a clue. It was a signal. Dr. Finch, your real, deepest secret isn't addiction. It's that you are a brilliant, published herpetologist who despises his medical career. That scale comes from a preserved, poisonous specimen only you own. The final twists. First, the needle's true purpose. You didn't inject Frank with a sedative, Doctor. You injected him with a slow-acting, highly refined neurotoxin extracted from that snake species, a substance that mimics a fatal heart attack over several hours. The venom was administered at 9 p.m., but timed to kill at midnight. Second, the vengeance. Frank, in his final moments, realized he was poisoned by the only man he thought he truly controlled. He used his dying strength not to indicate the killer, but to inflict a final act of psychological cruelty. He opened the Poe book to the only page where his wife Evelyn had signed her name years ago. He was framing Evelyn for the murder of his mistress years ago. He knew this would destroy her life one last time. Third, the knife. You stabbed him, Doctor, not to kill him, but to cover the venom's trace. When you came back at midnight and saw the poison hadn't worked fast enough, and he was struggling to point at the signed page, you stabbed him to silence his final act of spite, then ripped the scale from your collection and pinned it on him as your signature. Miller grabbed the heavy, loose gargoyle from the clock. He lifted it and spun it around, revealing that the other side of the statue's base was covered in a mix of fine, white powder. Miller, the plaster dust under the chair? That wasn't from the room. That was the antidote. You planned to save Frank's life at the last second, Doctor, to keep your supply open and ensure he lived to sign the will. But Frank told you he was leaving his fortune to a foundation you despise. He intended to destroy your reputation anyway. So you chose the addiction or the revenge. You chose the revenge. Dr. Finch, unable to speak, reached into his own coat pocket and pulled out a small, glass-stoppered vial. It contained the concentrated white antidote. He threw it to the floor. Finch, quietly, triumphantly, I would rather have nothing than be controlled by him. Miller looked at the shattered antidote, then at Finch, realizing the doctor had not planned a perfect murder, but a perfect, tragic suicide, sacrificing his own freedom for final autonomy. Miller, you got your control, Doctor, but you paid the highest price. Miller stood outside, watching the first streak of sun hit the wet stone of the mansion. He took a long drag from his cigarette, flipped the butt into a drain, and spoke. He didn't kill for cash, he killed for freedom. And a dead man still found a way to pin his name to the murder weapon. That's the difference between being smart and being good. The smart ones always leave a receipt.